Yo, this video is going to be a full breakdown of how I made my song Wandering. Starting with the first sketch in MIDI, going over other instruments I added, sound design I did, detailing and the arrangement, how I structured my mix, all the way to my final mastering chain. It's actually not a very long song, so I'm gonna play it to you in full. If you've already heard it, feel free to skip forward to the breakdown. This is where it all began, a sketch for solo piano in E minor. As you can see, the composition is quite simple, it just repeats a lot. The only main interesting thing is in the third section I go a bit off chromatically, so I've got this motif that I keep repeating. I repeat it, just transpose two semitones down with chords that do a little weird stuff. Let's just listen to those. But after those, we're back to basically repeating the same E minor motif here, just with some different counterpoint and a different chord over the course of the arrangement, and then we've got this long fade out at the end. I added quite a bit of this, but this is the basic structure the whole song is built around. The next thing I added in was a bass line for electric bass, because I kind of knew that these chords would get a bit boring, so I wanted to add some additional counterpoint, just playing the roots of the chord, having little fills here and there. The patch for the bass is something I use a lot. It's a grid patch that looks like this. It's a mix of a physical modeling, K+ strong comb resonator here, with wavetable as a sublayer that I then add some noise to, send through an amp, EQ, more EQ, and it sounds like this. So yeah, a bass patch that's actually included in my grid preset pack, something I put in almost every one of my songs because it works surprisingly well. Next, what I started thinking about is how do I want to orchestrate this melody, and I kind of knew I wanted some vocal layers in the background, maybe keep some of the piano, and then later I also added in some synths here, but let's listen to the vocals first. I added loads and loads of melodyne because I can't sing at all, so I just recorded these and really tuned them quite aggressively, added some processing here, and then on the send I have a second layer that I'll solo in a bit that's just pitched up an octave. So these are the vocals. then the quite quiet second layer we've got here is just pitched up with a little altar boy by 12 semitones. Let me just turn it up for you a little bit. That kind of thing. Next, we've got the first layer I added to the melody here, a massive X patch. I used a lot of Massive X in this song because I've made some presets for it before, and it just has this nice warm kind of organic sound. So this makes use of some of the feedback here, some of the analog filters, and some of the noise just to get it sounding a bit more natural than you could maybe with other synths. Skipping forward in time quite a bit, you can see how I used a similar process to just flesh it all out and group it into these kind of sections. I decided to all lay it out diagonally since I wanted to keep constantly changing and I just want to see everything on screen. So for example, you can see how to the second section here I've added a whole different drum loop that appears nowhere in the song. And essentially the way this is done is that I just made an addictive drum loop and then bounced out all the different stems here and mixed them. So let's maybe listen to the second section and then solo the drums. Kind of bit where this cello sound is quite dominant. It's pretty processed, just some distortion though. A bit of transient split to kind of EQ the tones and the transients differently and just get it sounding a bit more fitting in this electronic context. So let's take all the effects off and maybe add them bit by bit to let you hear. First, we've just got a tool that automates volume a little bit, just to add some more expression. Then we've got this transient split, where I kind of wanted different frequencies emphasized in the tones and the transients, so I've saturated the tones. And this kind of really helps it make it sound a bit more fake, because it sounded too real, too samply for me to quite fit this arrangement. You can see I only mixed this in later, so let's listen to the second section where I mixed it in. Really kind of thins out the sound. Then next we've just got some compression here and some panning. The decapitator, which sounds really nice and kind of cello and bass sounds. Just some saturation. Then some EQs boosting the high mids and just a tool for more volume. And then in terms of mixing, I've got a little bit blur to add some space. Another EQ, just taking out some low mids, boosting some highs just by ear. And another EQ after that doing a similar thing. And some spectra, quite a broad Q, so it's almost used like a spectral multiband compressor kind of thing. I like doing this with Speccraft sometimes. And these drums are just bounced out addictive drums. I did some processing to help once again make them fit in this kind of electronic context. So if I remember correctly, this kick actually has some dynamics processing in a equalizer and also some kind of retuning here. You can see how on the transients it always boosts the highs a bit just to give it a bit more snap here. And then we've got some more classic EQ, nothing too exciting on the hi-hat. The main snare needed quite a bit of transient shaping and compression, just to once again get it to fit in that kind of electronic context. So if we listen to it without all that stuff, transient shaping, compression, more transient shaping, in this case just taking the tail down, EQ, and a bit of blur on an additional layer, just to add some space. We've got more snares here, not much done to those. Room heads, hi-hats, some short percussions that are just metal sounds for my metal Foley pack, just to kind of add some additional detail to the drums here. And then I've got a tiny bit of glass rustle here just to fade into the snare, I think. Following the theme of completely different sections for the last sort of the climax of the song, we've got completely different drums here. These are all electronic. can hear how I really kind of leaned into the glitchy bits here. So I basically recorded these drums with lots of effects on them and then just kind of sequenced the best parts of these here into these glitches and bounced them out. So we've got these kind of main glitches here. And then I also designed a kind of Foley scape just to add some additional movement, give some more detail here, give some more stereo width also. The main kick is synthesized with a grid pad. It's not very complicated, it's just a sine wave with a pitch envelope and a volume envelope. And then we've got a little bit of FM here for the transient, and we've got a gate that's just biased for the transients just to shorten this a bit. And then for the snare, we've just got one of my snares from my sample packs with just lots and lots of layers, because that's what I like to do for snares, just to give lots of variation. Little bit of AP shaper for clipping saturation, little bit of tool, little bit of EQ, percussion bits just to kind of reinforce the main beats. So I've got this hi-hat here with my hi-hat shaper on it, which just adds a little bit of randomization, randomizing a transient shaper here with these random modulators, so these hi-hats never sound quite the same. And then some tiny risers here for the snare. And then in the second bit we add some more layers. We remove the main glitchy bits, kind of dial them back in a bit, but we do add some of these other glitchy bits made in a similar way. A bit more spatial, and we also add all these cymbals here just to kind of reinforce these main hits in this section. Give it more of that epic, big kind of sustained sound. You can see a lot of layers for the instruments actually come in this section. Some massive X patches here, some various bits and bobs, and also a voice sampler that just takes my little shitty singing bit, tuned it, put it in a sampler on granular mode, sounds like this. And then I've also got this piano sound, which is maybe quite interesting. I felt this really added a lot of impact and character to this. I was looking for a sound and I didn't really think it would be a piano. So let's listen to this at first and then I'll show you how I achieved this. You can hear how it barely sounds like a piano anymore. I just really squished it together. So what I did is, and you'll be able to hear it, it is a piano. Then I added some EQ, added some pitch shifter to add some highs, but only have a little bit of mix here. And then this is what makes this, I just really squished it into a saturator, and that gives it this really broad kind of synthy sound. Just driving the saturator way too hard. And then some more EQ, some blur for space, and some tool to kind of automate these tails in a bit, just to separate out the notes, because I felt they were blurring into each other a bit too much. And lastly, we've got this outro bit where I really wanted to make the song go very quiet. So after this chorus, it just almost fades to zero and then slowly comes back in kind of two sections. The first section is very quiet. We've got this kind of impact here that's just designed from some resampled drums. Then we've got this noise layer here, just some background stuff. Different kind of Foley bits I faded in and out. To kind of signal to people's ears that it's not fully over, while also having it really quiet. A massive X thing here, I just fade in. Playing the main motif, then some background stuff here. And it all is layered over this drone that I designed. So you can see here it's just a single note with some automation. The pigments patch makes use of the analog oscillator and the sample oscillator without any external effects. It sounds like this. You know, just some classic synth sounds, bit of bit crushing, added some effects. So I've got this tool here that I've used for volume automation. I've got a widener that just adds some side information. I've got a filter plus or some filter automation, and I wanted that character of that ladder filter. EQ just for mixing, also making the other sounds fit in. Sculpt here, once again for the kind of tube saturation it adds. This is some kind of pitch shifting to make it sound a bit more grainy. So let's listen without first maybe. These kind of pitch shifters I mix in, and some tremolo, that stereo, and a phaser to add some more movement and stuff, some more EQ, just trying to make other stuff fit. Spec craft here, doing some taming in the low mids, and a mid-side split, just high passing the sides. And this sound plays all throughout the outro. Then in the second half of the outro I bring in these glitches, which are basically resamples of the orchestral instruments you hear in the intro, just sent through different effects, kind of chopped up, add some, I don't know, mix of ear candy and kind of reminiscing the original melody. So because of the way the elements in the song always keep changing, I couldn't really do too much buzzing because every bit needs different processing, but I tried to do a little bit, and sometimes I actually used these buzzes to create transitions. So what I did, for example, on this intro master is I grouped all the intro track, and then as the intro ended, I faded in this bit crusher to create this kind of destruction effect to make the transition a bit more impactful here. If we just listen to that solo, it'll sound like this. It just tears the sound apart a little bit, and then some of these just have some bit crushing or some various automation bits, just to kind of help them sit right. When I was finishing mixing, I started building up my mastering chain and kind of trying to mix into it, seeing how the mix reacts to stuff. Dragged in some references here, just to keep my ears kind of fresh. As soon as I was happy with the mix and kind of felt it interacts with the mastering chain pretty decently, what I actually did is I bounced the master track in place here. So I just have a render here of what was coming into the master track, and then, as you can see, I just deactivated everything because I really wanted to free up some CPU so I could use high quality oversampling and so on in the mastering. I just have this here, this is the single track, and I still have my mastering chain that I built reacting to the mix, but now I can really tweak it. The way that this works is I have some EQ first of all. This is kind of just some linear phase on the sides because I wanted to keep the low end a bit narrower, kind of tighten it up a little. Then I have this analog phase, so a minimal phase kind of high pass filter at 19 Hertz, one pole, so it's really just to remove DC offset. Then I don't know why I did this quite, I just have some a high cut here, I guess to prevent aliasing a little bit. I'm not sure, I don't remember why this was necessary. Then I've got my mix bus here. This is something I often have on my masters. Just a tool here, Saturn 2. Tiny bit of subtle tape, zero drive, so it's really subtle effect. Tiny bit of glue compression here on the master with a bit of multiband, but it's also super subtle. And then to get my tonal balance right, what I like to do is I get this FX selector and make a chain for every different section of the song, because they often need different things, especially in a song with this much variation. So every one of these just has an AP equalizer in it with a different EQ profile. And then sometimes I also use TDR arbiter to add some dynamic EQ in certain bits that needed it. Some of them, this has a glue compressor. For example, this needed a bit of spectre apparently and a bit of volume. This just has an AP equalizer with very little in it. AP equalizer. This has a Pro MB apparently, just taming the low end of the drone in the outro. And then this just has AP equalizer. This is just a tool. And then I've got newfangled elevate set up here. I didn't really care to get this hyper loud, this track, so I just basically pushed the limiter till I could almost hear its effects, dialed it back a little bit, fast limiting, no transient emphasis, no clipping, because this kind of song is quite dynamic. I want to push it too hard in any way. And then that's my mastering chain, and that is the video on this track. I hope you found that useful. If you have any additional questions, let me know. I can make some members only videos walking through some more particular synth patches or something. If you're interested, just ask. And yeah, see ya. Bye.